Signature Bank Studios.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So the FBI raid on John Bolton's home occurred in real time while we were on the air Friday morning. So we didn't have much of the benefit of the context of this. Got a little bit more color on this over the weekend, including from President Trump, who had this to say of his former national security advisor.
No, I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. He's a real sort of a lowlife. When I hired him, he served a good purpose because, as you know, he was one of the people that forced Bush to do the ridiculous bombings in the Middle East. Bolton, he wants to always kill people, and he's very bad at what he does. But he worked out great for me because every time he doesn't talk, he's like a very quiet person, except on television. If he could say something bad about Trump, he'll always do that. But he really doesn't talk. He's quiet. And I'd walk into a room with him with a foreign country, and the foreign country would give me everything because they said, oh, no, they're going to get blown up because John Bolton's there. He's not a smart guy, but he could be a very unpatriotic guy. I mean, we're going to find out. I know nothing about it. I just saw it this morning. They did a raid.
Do you expect the DOJ to brief you on this?
Yeah, they'll brief me, probably today sometime.
And the foreign minister...
I tell Pam and I tell the group, I don't want to know, but just you have to do what you have to do. I don't want to know about it. It's not necessary. I could know about it. I could be the one starting it. I'm actually the chief law enforcement officer, but I feel that it's better this way.
The Wall Street Journal editorial board tore up Trump pretty good over this, and Kash Patel by extension. Writing, it is hard to see the raid as anything other than vindictive. Patel knows what the president thinks about Bolton, so it doesn't matter whether he ordered it. And the president's minions in Trump Part 2 don't serve as a check on his worst impulses the way grown-ups did in his first term. The presidential id is now unchained. They argue that he made it clear that he was out for Bolton when he pulled his security detail, even though Bolton has been targeted by the Iranians for assassination. The Wall Street Journal writes, it is unlikely that Bolton broke any laws on national secrets, and he certainly didn't share any with us over our long association with him. But perhaps Mr. Trump intends for the process itself to be the punishment, even if there's ultimately no criminal charge. The president may also hope the FBI raid will cause Bolton to shut up, though knowing him, we can't imagine that working. The real offender here, the Wall Street Journal editorial board concludes, is a president who seems to think he can use the powers of his office to run vendettas. We said this was one of the risks of a second Trump term, and it's turning out to be worse than we imagined. That's one perspective. Another perspective comes from Michael Schellenberger, but before we even get to that, remember what John Bolton had to say of the raid on Mar-a-Lago in 2022 over the handling and or possession of classified documents, because this is what we understand, what we believe is the nature of the raid on Bolton's house over his handling of classified information, the potentially what was included in his book, potentially, this is somewhat conjecture, but potentially what information that could have been of a classified nature that he shared with foreign actors. But this was Bolton in 22.
Any given moment. But I don't think he cared about the classification system. I don't think he appreciated the sensitivity of this information, and he didn't appreciate the sensitivity of how it was often acquired, the so-called sources and methods. So this had been briefed to him before I arrived. It was repeated frequently. I think it simply had no impact on him whatever. I think it's important that everybody take a deep breath here. This is a very serious matter, and it would be better if we could let the legal process play out.
Okay. Well, this could be a very serious matter. It's important if we let the legal process play out, isn't it? Wall Street Journal editorial board. If there's an underlying basis, legitimate underlying basis to pursue the investigation, whether or not he likes John Bolton is not material. And the fact that he doesn't is not material if there's an underlying basis to pursue the investigation. That's the standard, isn't it? I think it is. Michael Schellenberger, the investigative journalist, was on with Jesse Waters' program on Friday night to discuss this. And here's what he had to say. He sees this as attendant to the larger Russiagate hoax probe.
The Trump administration is serious. The Department of Justice is serious. The FBI is serious about prosecuting the Russia collusion hoax. That is what it looks like. And when you kind of look at the whole thing, I mean, to some extent, they're making it up as they go along. But I mean, we had emails, we had intelligence released a couple of weeks ago that suggested that Adam Schiff, that a conversation with Adam Schiff where he said that they were looking for, maybe not criminal prosecution, but possibly impeachment. That was way back in 2017. Get to 2019, they get that first impeachment. And you see Bolton again saying he's being very creative in his book, describing all the ways in which he thought that Trump should have been charged with impeachment, or the impeachment process should have gone, and criticizing the Democrats for making their scope too narrow. He wanted it to just be around a whole set of decisions that John Bolton happened to disagree with and make that the basis of impeaching the president.
For more on this, pleased to be joined by James Gagliano, retired FBI supervisory special agent, a doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. He also served as mayor of Village of Cornwall-on-Hudson in New York. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan, how you doing? How's everything going in Chicago?
It's pretty spicy here these days because of this whole controversy over the National Guard coming to town. But the Bolton raid, what's your take on the FBI's activity there?
Sure. Dan, I think, and I hate to be nuanced because you always call me out on that, but I think two things here can be true at the same time. What the predicate behind the raid at John Bolton's home and office, it was predicated on a couple of things. Title 18 USC Section 1924 criminalizes the unauthorized removal or the retention of classified documents that one is not allowed to be in possession of. And if you add Section 798, not to get too wonky here, Dan, it addresses the unauthorized disclosure of same classified information. For this to happen, I'm pretty certain there was a rock-solid predicate here because a judge, a neutral and unbiased, impartial, apolitical judge, had to sign off on that warrant for it to happen. What I struggle with is, sometimes, again, we go to, can you do something? Yes. Should you do something? Look, the president himself and the former president, President Biden, were both charged with the same thing, and raids were conducted on their personal homes and personal spaces. Now, presidents are held to a different account, right? A president can declassify anything. A president can declare something suitable for dissemination, whereas somebody like John Bolton, who, look, has served this country, whether you think he did it well or not well, but he served as the ambassador to the UN as well as a national security advisor in the first Trump administration. Is part of this retribution, is part of this tit for tat? Dan, there's a strong argument for that. But can a case be made that what was brought down here and signed off by a federal judge and the FBI executed the warrants that you spoke about on Friday morning? Can you make the same argument that we hold all people accountable to the law and no one is above the law? Then this was a righteous raid.
Yeah, the thing about that is you could make the same argument, right, with the FBI opening criminal investigations into Clapper, into Brennan and Comey, as we've talked about before. Yeah, it's pretty clear Trump doesn't like them. He fired one of them But it's pretty clear he doesn't like them, because it was pretty clear they were engaged in a fifth column action to derail a presidency. And you could understand where that would be a little annoying after a couple of years. In addition to, just to correct the record, Biden was never charged with the classified docs case, but Trump was, and this was obviously part of the discussion about the double standard that you're referencing. So, yeah, if there's some sense of vindication or even vindictiveness that informs the targeting, well, you put yourself in that position to basically taunt federal law enforcement by the activities that you took. And so if that puts you on radar that you might not have otherwise been on, well, that's on you so long as you said, there's a substantive underlying predicate under the law to pursue an investigation and any charges that may follow.
Sure. And, it's been debated in the press, and we've only had the weekend to kind of, disassemble this and try to read the tea leaves here. But was the raid focused on his 2020 book that was released, The Room Where It Happened, where he shared a lot of insight and stuff that, could have and should have and did rankle Trump and his loyalists and supporters, of course, or is it part of a broader inquiry? And that's the big question. Dan, I'm going to share something with you right here that your listeners may get a kick out of. So there's a rule in the Department of Justice, and obviously I served in the FBI, as you pointed out, for a quarter of a century, and I was subject to the same rules because the FBI answers to the DOJ. Anything that I do as a retired special agent, anything that I do is supposed to be run through something called pre-publication review. Mm-hmm. Dan, including this conversation we're having right now. Now, if we were to take the transcription of this conversation and I was to make it part of a book, Jimmy Gagliano's Life and Times, the FBI as I Know It, and I include this transcript, the conversation that we're having right now, Dan, I could run afoul of pre-publication review if I did not wait for them to clear it and suggest that I disclosed no classified information. It's different when you talk about it. It's different when you do a media hit for CNN or Fox or for your radio program. That's the thing here where there's two things that could have happened. Was it the fact that Bolton rushed that book out to get it published at the early onset of Biden's administration? He wanted to get it out when everybody was anti-Trump and Biden had won an election, or was it stuff that he leaked out selectively, shared things that he wasn't supposed to? But isn't that ironic that the conversation that you and I are having now, technically as a retired supervisory special agent, I should have to run through pre-publication review, but they allow the fact that, hey, it happens in real time, it's organic, and we're not going to hold you to that. However, if you take that very transcript from Dan's show, you put it into a book, it would have to be cleared by pre-publication review. Now, is this because Bolton published a book that Trump found offensive and disagreed with? Could be. Or were there other leaks that, remember, we don't get the details on the search warrant, all the predicates behind it, the probable cause. It's a very opaque process, and we will not know that for another couple of weeks. I'm going to guess and surmise. But when we do, I think it's going to clear up that murkiness and point to what exactly the charges were and the allegations were that allowed the FBI to go into his home and office and take things that he had there.
Yeah, I would. I think there's a pretty good indication that Bolton did submit that book for pre-publication review to the appropriate agencies for any information that was contained in there, because I remember. I think this is mentioned by the Journal, too, that there was an effort by Trump to block the publication. So, it would seem to me between Bolton and the publishing house, they would be, pretty idiosyncratic when it came to making sure they got the high sign from the relevant agencies.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know that it got muddied up because apparently Bolton rolled the book out before he had gotten the final okays and while it was still being adjudicated at the legal level. And look, let's not parse words here. Trump loathes Bolton as the day is long. Yeah. He loathes him with the intensity of 1,000 white-hot suns. But the bottom line is, and it goes back to this, you always argue to me, Jimmy, sometimes the process is just as important as what you believe or perceive the expected outcomes to be. Do I think John Bolton is going to go to jail for this? I'm going to go on the record right now and say he's not going to jail. Do I think that there was enough there to undergird a search warrant signed off by a federal judge for that search to be conducted? I absolutely do. But John Bolton is not going to go to jail over this. Here's my question. It becomes, this is going to continue because the Democrats are going to come back into power at some point in time. And when they do that, they're going to use this as Trump used the search at Mar-a-Lago to suggest that this is normal, this is how we do things. In the past, this would not have been something I believe that would have been charged. Although, and let me state this for the record, Dan, although a crime could have been committed here, but I don't think in the past it would have been charged.
Well, it's one of those things where, and we said this at the time, is so you start to do you start to weaponize law enforcement agencies and the law generally, prosecutors. You unleash people like of dubious ethical character like I would argue like Jack Smith, and you allow these fifth column actions to go unpunished inside the government. And don't be surprised when this boomerangs back on you, and that. And in part that may be happening right now. And so, right, it's a problem because it's taking us down a dangerous path, but it's a path that was initiated by the left. I want to get to something else. So we got a tranche of Epstein documents that were released on Friday, and basically, according to Ghislaine Maxwell, per this sworn deposition, nobody ever did anything. I mean, I never ever saw any man do something inappropriate with a woman of any age, she said.
Yeah. I
never witnessed the president in any appropriate setting in any way. He was never inappropriate with anybody. That she's talking about Trump. In the times I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects. But she also basically said the same thing about Clinton. And he's on the travel logs 26 times. But she characterized it as basically one journey. I mean, what? It's like are they doing touch and goes between, Massaquoi and Epstein Island? I mean, what? This is, and she also doesn't believe Epstein died of suicide. I mean, there's 300 pages of nothing because what she's saying is not credible.
Yes. Well, first of all, I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted felon.
Yeah, exactly.
We take what they say worth a grain of salt. Now, are there things that we use on the federal side to help us, get to the kingpin or to take more harmful people off the streets? Absolutely. Do you sometimes have to make a deal with the devil? Dan, you didn't grow up in a convent, neither did I. We both understand that sometimes that has to happen. Now, having said that, and here I'll share a little bit more news with you. Todd Blanche serves as the Deputy Attorney General. He was also Donald Trump's attorney in the New York case. I've known Todd for approximately 20 years. Todd is a good friend of mine. So I'm going to preface everything that I'm going to say with telling you that I know Todd well. I speak to Todd probably several times a month. He's a good man and he's doing a good job. There were a lot of people that became apoplectic when they heard that the Deputy Attorney General, Trump's, prior consigliere, if you will, because he supported him and represented him in those cases in New York City. When I spoke to Todd about the purpose and the meaningfulness, what were you attempting to get out of this meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell? Well, first of all, there were charges that he did this, by himself. It was unhinged. Prosecutors do not meet with defendants or criminals without a law enforcement officer there because the law enforcement officer is trained in interrogation. The prosecutor is then trained in taking that information and making a case out of it. And Todd said, of course the FBI was involved in this. And yes, I conducted the interview, but the FBI was, right seat, left seat on the interviews on this. Well, what do you hope to gain from this? Well, it's to put to rest this whole idea about the conspiracy that the federal government was in. The left had no interest in it for the 4 years Joe Biden was president. But now, because everyone's suggesting, hey, there's just no smoking gun there, that doesn't mean bad things didn't happen. And bad people did bad things to young women and should be held to account. But Do I believe that President Trump was involved in that, or do I believe that Bill Clinton was? From what I understand from the interviews, from what I understand from the evidence that is at hand, and maybe there's more, obviously there is, I do not believe so. So that's where we are on that. I think they're trying to put it to rest. I mean, obviously Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is probably angling right now to get the attention of the president, and how better to do that than to step out and say, he's a great guy, I never saw him do anything, and then hope on his way out that she gets a presidential pardon. That's the cynic in me, and I'm sure that's the cynic in you too, Dan.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but when she says things that are just absurd, yeah, there's no list of people getting massages. I can barely recall the people. I struggle to recall the actual people that I met. And she can't remember anything. You know, her mind is gone blank. And nobody, she never saw anybody do anything inappropriate to anyone. I mean, that's a categorical statement. So like that as the basis for seeking a commutation, much less a pardon. I mean, it's laughable. But equally laughable are people on the left running around after this sworn deposition and what Ghislaine Maxwell had to say and the effort to unseal the grand jury transcripts. Equally laughable is the left saying that Trump is, using the raid on Bolton, using the National Guard deployment to misdirect people's attention away from the Epstein files. I'm paying attention to the Epstein files. We don't have anything, including from Ghislaine Maxwell, who we were hoping to get something from, but she's clearly not talking, even though she's talking.
Yeah. I think it was a mistake. I mean, obviously the Attorney General Pam Bondi made a mistake when she said, and she used the term, and it's a ubiquitous term that we've heard thrown around so often, the Epstein files. What does that mean? Does that mean there's a categorical listing there of so-and-so visited the island on such and such time, received a massage from such and such, and then left at such and such time? I don't think that exists. In fact, I'm fairly confident, not that I have inside information, but I'm fairly confident that that does not exist. I think that for transparency purposes, people want things released. However, when you do release them, and this is where I push back on the QAnon clowns, and I say, really, you want the grand jury testimony to be released. You realize that you are now going to uncover victims' names, and it's going to become part of the public record.
Well, you can redact that.
Dance there.
Yeah.
Well, but there's a delicate dance there, and people, the online internet sleuths will put things together, and those people will be outed. And look, Dan, I think you agree with me on this. If there was something tying Trump to anything tawdry or anything illegal, it would have been dropped in 2015. It would not have waited 10 years later for us to all of a sudden discover it and find it.
James Gagliano, retired FBI supervisory special agent, doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. He also served as mayor of Village of Cornwall on Hudson in New York State. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, great to join you. Be careful and stay safe, brother.
Thank you. And Jim joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
Your show keeps me alive during the week. There's nobody I'd rather listen to between 5 and 9 in the morning than you guys.
On AM 560, The Answer.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
Hi, my name's Neil. I have some advice for you if you've been trying to break free from credit card debt. You can start by doing what I did. Get your bills together and call Trinity Debt Management. Trinity is dedicated to helping people like me become debt-free. When I called, my first experience was a feeling of relief. My counselor